Good morning. Good afternoon, I should say. Commissioner Hogue's first report comes to conclusions and findings that are starkly different from what the Trudeau government has told us over the last 18 months, and conclusions and findings that are different from the report of Mr. Johnston of a year ago. She concluded that interference occurred in the last two general elections. And while this interference did not have an impact on which party came to power, it could have had an impact on the results at the riding level. And she concluded that it impacted the broader electoral system, that it undermined public confidence in Canadian democracy, and that it disproportionately targeted and negatively affected diaspora communities, particularly the Chinese community. Commissioner Hogue specifically concluded with respect to Mr. Dong's nomination in Don Valley North that the suspicion that Beijing interfered in Mr. Dong's nomination was well-grounded, and that this is significant because it could have determined the candidate who was elected to Parliament. She also concluded that Mr. Trudeau told her that he did not veto Mr. Dong's nomination because it would have direct electoral consequences, because the Liberal Party was expected to win Don Valley North, and she questioned why the Prime Minister did not take action as he said he was going to do after the election. With respect to Mr. Chew's election in Steveston, Richmond East, she concluded that there were strong indications of the PRC's involvement and that there is a reasonable possibility that the narratives could have impacted the results in this riding. And so this report is a damning set of conclusions and findings in the first phase of this inquiry about what the Trudeau government has indicated over the last 18 months and contradicts much of what the government has told us over that period of time. We look forward to her continuing her work in the second phase of this inquiry. And now I'll pass along the podium to my francophone colleague.
Merci beaucoup, Michael. Les conclusions de la juge Hogue sont clairement différentes de ce que l'on entend de la part du premier ministre et de son gouvernement depuis les 18 derniers mois. C'est également extrêmement différent des conclusions du rapport du rapporteur spécial David Johnston. Ce qu'on a appris aujourd'hui, c'est que la commissaire a confirmé que l'ingérence s'est manifestée lors des deux dernières élections générales, qu'elle a eu un impact sur ces élections et sur les droits des Canadiens et Canadiennes de bénéficier de processus électoraux et d'institutions démocratiques à l'abri de l'influence étrangère. Ce que la commissaire a aussi dit, c'est qu'elle a confirmé que l'ingérence étrangère a diminué la capacité de certains électeurs de voter de façon éclairée. Bien que le rapport reconnaisse également qu'il n'y a pas eu d'impact qui aurait changé le résultat global des élections, des deux dernières élections, la commissaire a toutefois déclaré qu'elle ne peut pas exclure que cela ait pu avoir un effet sur les résultats au niveau de certaines circonscriptions. Dans le cas de l'investiture libérale dans Don Valley North, la commissaire Hogue souligne que des indications bien fondées d'ingérence de la République populaire de Chine aurait pu avoir une incidence sur l'identité de la personne qui a finalement été élue au Parlement. Elle note aussi que le gouvernement et que le premier ministre Trudeau a décidé de ne pas destituer Han Dong, invoquant des conséquences électorales directes, ce qui confirme que les décisions du premier ministre ont été motivées par des intérêts politiques partisans. Dans le cas de l'ancien député conservateur Kenny Chiu, la commissaire a constaté, et je la cite, qu'il y a de solides indicateurs de la campagne d'ingérence de Pékin et qu'il y avait une possibilité raisonnable que cela ait entraîné la défaite de M. Chiu et l'élection de son adversaire libéral. Elle dit, enfin, ce que l'on retient, c'est que le risque d'ingérence étrangère dans nos élections s'aggravera tant et aussi longtemps que le gouvernement libéral ne prendra aucune mesure pour l'atténuer. Nous allons continuer de demander des comptes. Nous attendons avec beaucoup d'intérêt la deuxième partie du rapport de la juge Hogue. Merci.
que M. Chong, si vous voulez, aussi en français, ou M. Berthold. En quoi ça contredit la version des faits de M. Trudeau? Je ne suis pas sûr de comprendre ce que vous voulez dire.
Well, I'll answer in English first, and then my colleague can answer in French for all of you. Mr. Trudeau indicated that this did not affect the election results at the riding level, and Justice Hogue concluded that while it's impossible to prove this because we have a secret ballot in Canada, that it did impact, in her language, the broader electoral system. It undermined public confidence, disproportionately targeted diaspora communities, and that one could reasonably conclude that it could have had an impact at the riding level. That's very different than what the Prime Minister had been indicating to us over the last 18 months. In addition, when it came to the intelligence that the government was provided with respect to the nomination in Don Valley North, where the intelligence indicated that the PRC was coercing international students into voting under threat to having their visas revoked and their families targeted back home, and corruptly interfering in that nomination by providing through proxy agents fraudulent addresses. The Prime Minister indicated that the intelligence, in his view, was not actionable. The Justice Hogue, however, concluded that the suspicion that the PRC interfered in that nomination was well grounded, and that it is significant because it could have impacted which candidate, which individual was elected in Don Valley North. So those are just two examples of the stark contrast between not only Mr. Johnson's report of last year, but what the government has been telling Canadians in Parliament over the last 18 months.
Le rapport de la commissaire...
Il y a des nuances, mais ce n'est pas une grande contradiction, c'est juste des nuances. Là.
Je pense que le premier ministre a été très clair en disant que l'ingérence étrangère n'avait pas eu d'effet sur les résultats généraux des élections, ni sur aucune circonscription. Et la juge Hogue a conclu aujourd'hui qu'elle avait des raisons de croire bien fondées qu'effectivement l'ingérence étrangère avait pu jouer un rôle dans l'élection, dans la circonscription de M. Kenichiu. Elle dit qu'elle ne peut pas confirmer hors de tout doute parce que le vote est secret, on en est bien conscient, mais elle dit qu'il est possible que l'ingérence étrangère ait pu avoir un résultat différent dans cette circonscription-là, ce qu'a toujours nié M. Trudeau. La deuxième chose, c'est concernant Don Valley North, le premier ministre a toujours mis en doute l'information à l'effet qu'il y avait eu une ingérence étrangère provenant de la République populaire de Chine qui a pu influencer le choix du candidat libéral pour cette circonscription. Et la juge Hogue aujourd'hui a dit qu'il y avait des informations plutôt bien fondées qui ont démontré qu'il y a eu effectivement une action qui a fait en sorte que des étudiants ont pu être même forcés d'aller voter pour un certain candidat. Et pourquoi on estime que ça peut avoir des effets sur le résultat d'une élection? C'est que le résultat du choix d'une nomination dans une circonscription que le gouvernement s'attendait de gagner, l'ingérence étrangère a fait en sorte de choisir le candidat qui a finalement été élu. Donc, c'est une deuxième circonscription où l'ingérence étrangère a eu un impact direct.
Monsieur Chong, la commissaire a dit qu'il y aurait un classified supplement à son rapport. Je voulais savoir, est-ce que vous allez vous prévaloir de la possibilité de le lire? Parce que I think you got security clearance. Et est-ce que votre chef va le faire lui aussi?
OK. Premièrement, je n'ai pas le security clearance.
So you have some clearance.
I have access to the public report. I've not been cleared at this commission to review top secret or secret information. That said, I think the public report that has been released contains all the information that we need to know to come to conclusions about this government. You know, I mentioned earlier that it's in stark contrast to what the government has told us. The government has consistently also told us that the system worked in the last two elections. Justice Hogue concluded that interference took place in the last two elections, and she was quite critical of the panel and the protocol governing the panel and how it conducted itself during the election. She was also critical of the site panel and how it conducted itself and the the rules governing that part of the Government of Canada. So I think the public report has plenty of information for us to come to conclusions.
Just to be clear, you
I will
don't
not-
see the need to get the classified report?
That's correct. I
Is
have.
that also the position of your party and his leader?
Yeah, our position is that we have sufficient information from the public-facing information released by the Commission, both in this report and in the evidence that has been released, to come to very strong conclusions.
Last question.
Minister Hogue said that there are significant gaps in the nomination process and that the Liberals need to relook at their process. And Mr. LeBlanc just said he's got confident in that party's nomination process. Do you have any response to that, and are you confident in the Conservative nomination process?
I'm confident that the Conservatives have a very tight party membership process. We require members of the party to be either Canadian citizens or permanent residents of Canada, two very clearly defined matters in law. We also require people to purchase a membership, which through either a credit card or a personal check, that it has to be directly tied to that individual, which makes it much more difficult for people to fraudulently bypass the system. I think the Liberal Party needs to tighten up its rules. I think it's clear through this first report that there are major problems with the way in which Liberals have structured their party and their nomination rules. In fact, Commissioner Hogue indicated in her report that she will have more to say on this in the second phase of her inquiry. And it's clear in her conclusions in this first report that the intelligence that Beijing interfered coercively and corruptly in assisting Mr. Dong in winning his nomination were well-founded, and that this is significant because it could have impacted the individual who was elected to Parliament. Yes, Madam Hogue did use the word suspicion in lieu of intelligence, but I think we can safely say that that suspicion derived from the intelligence provided to the Prime Minister, who did not take action in the lead-up to that general election.
Thank you.
Thank you.